Welcome, welcome, welcome to Facing the Nation for October 18th, 2024. As you know, I would always ask that you call up a neighbor, call up a friend, tell them Facing the Nation is on today, and you cannot afford to miss today's show. Of course, you can view us on our platforms, the People's National Congress Reform page on Facebook, the APNU AFC page on Facebook, our pages as well on YouTube. So call up a friend, call up a neighbor, tell them Facing the Nation is on, and we have a lot to discuss. And being that, every time we have these discussions every week, our time runs out so quickly because there is so much to talk about. I do not want to delay the introduction of my guest today. He is, of course, no stranger to social media, no stranger to Guyana. He has been in the business of the representation of the people for decades. He is a professor as well by profession. And, he's involved in so many things over the years that, would have helped our country in a positive light. And he continues to push in every sphere for that to continue. My guest today is none other. And bear in mind, let me add this as well. He is also now the leader of the Working People's Alliance, and he is no other than Dr. David Hinds. Welcome.
Thank you, Shaneika, and thanks for having me again.
All right. Every time we have these programs, the time runs out so fast. So I don't want us to delay this talk today. My guests are quite familiar with you by now. We've done all the formal introductions. I've just added. I know this is the of recent. You have been elected, or I believe re-elected, because I do believe you hold that portfolio before, as the leader of the People's Working Alliance. And I want to congratulate you on that as well.
Thank you very much. I'm actually the co-leader. We are a kind of different kind of party.
Oh, okay.
Certain era, so we have three co-leaders. So I am one of the co-leaders.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and so just for the viewers, who are the other two persons? We're getting the information.
Brother Takumo Gonse and Brother Rohit Kanai are the other two co-leaders.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, so let's get into the discussion. Of course, it has been the hottest thing in social media, and it has been going every day. It seems to be getting a new dimension of how it goes, where it goes. But of course, we had that announcement from the president where he announced different measures that they're going to take to supposedly mitigate cost of living. And in those measures, there are about what I will call two cash grants and a tax write-off in some sense. And for this part of the discussion, I would like us to talk about those. We had the announcement of the 200,000 cash grant per household. And after the opposition and many other persons, citizens would have taken to social media to discuss the issues they had, and of course, recalling the 25,000 COVID cash grant, we then saw the president came again with a new announcement where he's now saying that he will give $100,000 to every adult citizen, meaning from the age of 18, $100,000. I know that the WPA, since I believe we started the conversation about in the coalition period about the oil revenues, there was much discussion, particularly coming from the WPA holding symposiums and talking about how cash grants and other initiatives could benefit the population. So let's talk about how the WPA feels about this, and even giving us a view on those talks that you had since then.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Back in 2018, Professor Clive Thomas, on behalf of the WPA, at a Buxton Emancipation event, the annual EUC Quayana Symposium, threw out the idea of giving part of the oil money directly to the people as a means of alleviating poverty. Uh, we felt that when the oil began to flow, that it should not be left just to the government to decide what to do. We should take part of that money and give it to citizens so that they can decide what to do. And we thought that taking 10% of the revenue once we begin to get a certain amount of money from the oil would be reasonable. At the time, it was a new idea in Guyana, but it's not a new idea because it has been used in most of the oil-rich countries. It has been used in a lot of Latin American countries, Brazil, Mexico, etc. It is used in part of Africa. And even in the Caribbean, Jamaica has a version of it. And I think the IDB just did a study on the Eastern Caribbean to find out whether what they call a universal basic income should be used. So it is an accepted model for alleviating poverty. The United Nations has accepted it as a model to alleviate poverty. So it was not new in the world, but it was new in Guyana. And so at the time when Professor Thomas floated the idea, there was a lot of consternation. Some people said that, if we give money to people like that, they're going to spend it out, they're going to drink it out. Some people said that it can't work. Jack Dio said it is a technically unsound proposal, and I'm quoting him here directly. He said that if it's going to be implemented, it would be at the earliest 2030, if ever. If ever. So that was Jack Dio. Nandalal said that it will break up families and it will turn Guyanese into parasites. And so there was that kind of knee-jerk response. But we knew that this is an idea that is being used all over the world, and it has been successful. In fact, in the United Nations Sustainable Program, it is #1. The alleviation of poverty, and using this model of cash transfers or universal basic income. Since then, as you said, that we have been plugging away, and people have come around to accepting it, especially people on our side, what is now called the opposition side, who were reticent at the beginning. They have now come around to accept some version of it. The PPP is claiming, Jack is claiming that it was part of their manifesto. And that is misleading. That is very misleading. And so the PPP never envisaged using this. They were comfortable going around the place, sharing out a 20,000 here, a 40,000 here, and then they quote unquote target certain groups, fishermen, sugar workers, so that they get to target groups that are favorable to them. Now, the WPA proposal was never a willy-nilly proposal. We feel it should be universal to all Guyanese, and we chose to do it through households. Because in doing it through households, our view is that it is most democratic. It is not going to be targeted to Indians, it's not going to be targeted to Africans or Amerindians. Everybody will get the same amount of money, and then it will be done every year. Every year, whatever you earn, you take 10% of it. It may come up to 100,000 this year. It may come up to 300,000 the next year. But you
Mm-hmm.
are guaranteed it. And we feel that if people are guaranteed this income, they can plan their lives better. They can use
Mm-hmm.
that income to as collateral to get loans. They can use it to upgrade a small business because they know it's coming every year. And it's not a capitalist or a socialist thing. They use it in Alaska. There are
Yeah.
versions of it, I think, in Texas, right? So it is
Mm-hmm.
not an ideological thing. And so therefore the PPP, when they made that announcement, we said, it is an admission of a couple of things. It is an
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
admission that the PPP has no idea how to deal with the question of poverty, and that the ideas to deal with question of poverty come from the opposition side. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what could be more ridiculous than a PPP president going to parliament, making a big policy announcement, and headlining it with ideas from two of their opponents? Free education at university PNC, cash
Correct.
transfer WPA. I mean, it's the most
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous thing. You are admitting that your opponent's ideas are the right ideas, are more superior ideas. And so that's one. So, secondly, you're admitting that your ideas to put money in people's pocket and to raise them out of poverty have failed. Your
Mm-hmm.
ideas have failed. Jagdeo likes to run off. And we did this for light. We did this for water. We give this subsidy for this. Well, after giving all of that subsidy, Mr. Jagdeo, 42% of our people still live on
Poverty.
5.5 US dollars or 1100 US dollars per day. Abject poverty. So after you
Mm-hmm.
give all these things that you talk about, we give this, we give this, we give gold scholarship. Half of your population still live in abject poverty. So it's an admittance that those ideas have failed and that ideas
Mm-hmm.
coming from the opposition are the superior ideas. Of course, when you thief, people think you don't know who
Mm-hmm.
use it, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
that is what they get caught in. Came out on the first week and said we're gonna give it also no study, no study,
Mm-hmm.
no
Not even
feasible.
a definition of a household.
What is the definition of a household? How many people are there in a household, etc. So then, when you teach people things, you don't know how to use it. It drop in your hand. You go, you come back. You say, I change from household to individual. What is the definition of an individual? This clumsy definition of the individual, which now they stole from and Mr. Jordan, Winston Jordan, who said, okay, perhaps the most effective way to do it is to give $100,000 to the household. They grapple that and they run with it. And now they have to define what is a house, what is an individual. An individual is someone who's 18 years old on the 1st of January 2024 and who's a Guyanese with a passport or a ID card. Now that is broad. Now I live in Guyana 4 or 5 months per year. But I'm a Guyanese. I have a Guyanese passport, the driver's license, ID card. So I get $100,000. All right. So they have not worked this thing out. So all them people who coming home for Christmas from overseas, who are Guyanese, but don't live there all the time, come drawing down. And so
Mm-hmm.
they cannot tell us how many people are going to get this $100,000. They cannot say that.
Well, it speaks to what all of our discussions, even long before today, have always suggested that the government does not have any plans. They don't know how to, you know, think something through, put stuff together to ensure that the policies that they put forward. I mean, at base, if you're going to do a policy, there are certain things that you must know early, as in defining what you're talking about. And every day with these announcements, we are seeing more and more. that the government is showing their incompetence in governing, in planning, and in policy. We talk about the 200 thousand now turning 100,000. But I want to point out, because I mean, a lot of people are simply just talking about the 100,000. There is this, what we have heard in the announcement as well, at $10,000 health care grant per child. And here again, I believe this is another admission, like you're saying, from the government, that our healthcare system is extremely poor. It is poor to the point that you need to give citizens money to go to a private place, because only a private place you should be taking any form of voucher or cash to, because according to our constitution, healthcare should be free in Guyana. So if you're going to give $10,000, then it has to go to private institutions. Only today I visited a health center, and the complaints are many in regards to how the Ministry of Health is dealing with those healthcare facilities. I'm hearing that healthcare centers are borrowing things like dressing, etc., from other health centers, and have to wait until they get it back and give back to some. And there's some other basic things they just don't have in an oil rich Guyana. And here you are talking about a 10K healthcare grant per child. And it seems like it means that we're not going to fix the health system. But we know, one, they don't want to pay the nurses, they don't want to pay the doctors, and apparently they don't want to take care of the health facilities either. Let's talk about that.
A very important point, because you see, man shall not live by bread alone, so the Christians say, the Bible says, you know. Um, Healthcare, education, and wages, they're linked together. They're very, very, very important. If you can get healthcare correct, where your citizens are healthy, and the more healthy they are, the more productive they will be. If you can get the education level, and this includes formal education and technical education, if you can get your people educated and trained, they become more productive, and they're going to be able to earn more. All right? Now, if in addition to that, you give them these cash grants, so these cash transfer in a structured way, when you add their education upgrade and the health upgrade and the financial upgrade, they're on their way out of poverty. All right? In fact, in our proposal, we are throwing out the idea that when you give a cash grant, a cash transfer every year, the government asks people to ensure that your children go to school, because we are giving you this cash transfer. You no longer have to pull your child out to go and sell plantain chip at the corner of the road when she should be in school. So we are giving you the cash grant. So the money that that child would have spent, would have made selling plantain chip, you now get it as a cash transfer. Send that child to school. We will monitor school attendance. And for children, if you get the cash grant as adults, you must guarantee that your children visit the health center and go and get their regular checkup. So we, instead of giving you $10,000 and say, go to a private hospital, and often the private hospitals are owned by our friends, rather than doing it, we are going to give you that in the cash transfer. And we are going to ensure that the government health centers are capable and equipped to deal with human lives. You see, what the government is, that they also, well, we build 8 hospitals. And, well, you build 8 hospitals, but Guyana is still a place where people, when they get sick,
Basic healthcare.
basic health care we don't have.
So you got to go to the US or somewhere else.
Invest the money in a human healthcare system, a human-centered, not a building-centered. You're
Mhm,
talking here about healthcare center that caters to human beings, not caters to tourists. When
mhm,
tourists come in, they see a big hospital, they say, wow, development. But what inside of the hospital, you can't take care of your own people. So it is
mhm,
not a people-centered, to quote Aubrey Norton. It's not a people-centered healthcare, right?
mhm,
We want a people-centered healthcare system, a human-centered. An healthcare system, what is the outcome? The outcome is to ensure that our people live longer. The outcome is to ensure that our people get more healthy. You have to have outcomes.
mhm.
That's why you do studies that
Correct.
Mr. Jack
Mhm,
Dio doesn't like. And so, therefore, this $10,000 is just a gimmick. You,
mhm,
you take the $10,000, you go, you get a checkup. The doctor tell you your child have a certain kind of illness. Where you gonna get the money now
mhm,
to treat the illness? Because
mhm,
the government hospitals are not able to deal with basic healthcare, basic illnesses. We got to go to Trinidad, we got to go to America. People got embarrassed themselves by collecting money to say, all of that kind of stuff.
mhm, mhm,
Whereas
mhm,
if you spend the money building up the healthcare system to cater to your people. We are in Guyana. What kinds of diseases are we more prone to? Is it diabetes? Is it hypertension? Then, if our people are most prone to certain diseases, then your healthcare system ought to be able to
mhm,
develop a mechanism to prevent those diseases and to contain those diseases. So there's a linkage between the the health profile of your country and your healthcare system. And here
mhm,
are the outcomes. We want to get rid of poverty. We want our society to become much more healthy. And we want our society to become much more educated. And you integrate that. Sounds to me
mhm.
like a plan. Sounds to
Yep.
me like a vision of where
Mhm,
you want to take your society. So you're quite correct. The healthcare initiative, again, it's just a gimmick, and it's not
mhm.
about dealing with the health problem. Shanika, you have young children,
Yes.
and
Can't do anything.
you, but when you look around, you see 20-year-old now with diabetes.
Mhm, mhm. And
That
you're
must
looking And you're also looking at a new phenomena that we're looking at, particularly in Guyana, is where you're having children between the ages of about 8 to 14 who are appearing to be pre-diabetic, etc., that
yes,
you're dealing with. And our healthcare facilities are not able to cater for a lot of that. I mean, I took my son has his own a little health challenges at times. And sometimes you go to some of those health centers, and when they give you two medication, they got to give you another list to go and take to the pharmacy.
there you go. There
And
you
then you have others, you don't even have staff to facilitate what is happening there. I heard as well today about a complaint at some health centers as well, where persons are saying sometimes parents realize that they have an emergency with the child. And rather than taking them to Georgetown Hospital because they know what the weight might be like, etc., and they feel going to the health center speeds it up. So they go to the health center. Now, the health center, because it's an emergency that they can't deal with, needs to call the ambulance and send a nurse. Now, they're left because most times it's just one or two in some of those health centers without a nurse. And the nurses are saying when they take that child to the hospital, they then have to put their hands in their pockets to get transportation back to their workplace. And these are the kind of issues that people are facing daily. And I like the word that you use. For me personally, many of the things that we're hearing, they're nothing more about political gimmicks by the PPP.
Yes, yes, yes. Very much political gimmicks by the PPP. Look, we are earning, projected this year, the government is projecting $545 billion coming in from oil.
Mhm,
Some of the other global organizations are putting it closer to $600 billion All right.
Mhm.
Now $600 billion compared with what we used to get
Mhm.
before oil. That's a lot of money. It's not crumbs.
Mhm.
It's not,
Mhm.
it's nothing. It's a lot of money compared. Now, if you take 10% of $600 billion, that's $60 billion, right? And
Mhm.
if you distribute that money, and next year we are projected to up that by
Mhm.
another 300 billion. So if you take 10%, which is the 60 billion that
Mhm.
they're talking about there,
About,
and you
yeah.
distribute it, whether you give it to individual or give it to household, but you give it to people. And then next year they know that they will either get another 60 billion thing or more than that, perhaps less,
Mhm.
but more likely more.
Mhm.
Then people are able to plan their lives because this is something that is coming in. It's not, we're not saying take the entire budget, and we're not even saying to dip into the non-oil budget, because the
Budget.
money that is coming in from taxes, the money that is coming in from other
Gold,
aspects of it, gold,
agriculture.
agriculture. We're not saying, we are saying you get all of that. The oil money that is coming in, just take 10% of it. And
Mhm.
you get a 90% left, and you get all the other sources of revenue to do all the other things that you want to do, right?
Mhm.
And this lady who has a son, right, who may be autistic, and
Mhm.
she doesn't have the wherewithal to, because I was talking to a friend of mine who's taking care of an autistic child, and my God, when I listen to what goes into that, I'm
Mhm.
saying that if that person gets a cash grant of $300,000 or $400,000, and the first thing that lady's thinking about is how to get the right medication, the right kind of
Mhm.
training, the right kind of this, the right kind of care for our child, because it's your baby. So this thing that when people get the money, they're going to spend it out and liquor and all that kind of thing is nonsense. It has
Mhm.
shown, a lot of the studies have shown that when people get health cash transfer, they spend it on two things mainly: food and childcare.
Mhm.
Most of the studies, there was a recent study in California that showed that they did a pilot project. And the pilot project showed that over 90% of the cash transfer that they gave, the people spend it on food and healthcare.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so therefore, you have to trust your people to be able to mm, have their priorities. Or people say, you not live a house, you not know where you leak.
Leak. Correct.
If you live in your house, you know that when rain fall, my roof is leaking, and
Mhm.
it paralyzes my household. You get a cash transfer. The first thing you
Yeah.
call that tinsmith. I don't know if that's what they call them anymore in the villages. You get the tin, and you say, "Bye, come, put on a new
Perfect.
roof."
Mhm.
And by putting on a new roof, it changes the lives of the people living in that home. When rain
Correct.
fall, they don't have to
Don't
stop
get wet.
their
Mhm.
lives. They don't have to get
Mhm.
wet. We had the
Mhm.
spectacle of children with umbrella in a school. You remember that picture? Where I think it was Bartica. The children were in
Yes.
school with umbrella.
Cool. Under the umbrellas. Yes. Mhm. Mhm.
You see, so these are the human things that this government is not concerned about. This government is concerned about form, but not content. They're talking about growth, but not development. Growth is not development. The growth that Guyana is getting now is not because of the PPP. If the APNU were in government, if the APNUFC were in government, we would have had the same growth. Because the
Mhm.
growth is not because of government. The growth is because of God. If you are a Christian, you will say, is God put the oil there? Right? The growth is because of oil, not because of government. It is
Mhm.
government that has to translate that growth into development. And how do
Mhm.
you translate growth in development? First of all, you have to do studies so that you can know what your society looks like, what
Need
are the
and
needs,
what it needs.
and so on.
Mhm.
And then, so this government is not interested in turning growth into development. This government is interested in funneling money from the state coffers to private hands that are what you all call friends and favorite and family in the
Friends,
PNC
family, and favorites.
and favorite. So they are concerned about transfer of wealth from the government to a chosen sector of the society. No wonder you drive around Georgetown and other parts of Guyana and you see some people in some vehicle that you got people in the United States who just work for big money, can't drive those
They
vehicles.
can't drive. Correct, correct.
They're big more than some people's house and they're
Mhm.
driving around the place. So what we are seeing is a systematic transfer of wealth to a sector of the society. That sector of the society is now using that wealth to buy more favors from the government
Mhm.
because it gives Freedom House a cut, it gives high officials a cut. It is also, they're using the part of the private sector, using that transfer, that wealth that they get in order to commandeer and buy votes for the PPP. So they
All
go
right.
into community and they say we are doing charity work. But the money for the
Mhm.
charity work is not their money. It's money that
Mhm.
transferred to them from the government. And they go in
Mhm.
there and they mobilize people. Look, the government is trying. Look, the government is this. I'm going to give you
Correct.
a contract and so on. And so they are going in there to catch people and to sell them as votes to the PPP. It's a real coordinated system that is going on that has to be broken. And the primary way of breaking it is, first of all, to say no. And second of all, when elections come around, to vote in a new government.
So I was coming to that. Quick mention on this. Another 10K, they like the number, all these round, lovely numbers. A 10K tax reduction per child, per parent. I again, I see a heavy confusion when we talk about something like that because there are so many issues that you will lead with. How do I decide which parent gets this tax reduction? Does this parent pay tax? Because
That's right.
then you don't cater for a certain level of persons in society because many of them pay no taxes. They earn way below. They ain't filing nothing because they never know nothing about that. They're doing a little day-to-day job, whatever. Again, and even those who pay tax, if there's a situation where those persons are not together, so it doesn't benefit the household in one suit. But then how do you say, well, okay, you say the child lives with the mother, so the mother gets the reduction, but you're on the same hand, you're asking through the court for that gentleman to pay child support. So how do we debuckle all of that again? As I say, and I think you're making the same point, the PPP does not study, put out, go through the policy structure to see how things will work, study definitions to get it done. But you made a point that I want us to get to because I wanted us to discuss the current political situation. And I believe that all these cash grants, all these handouts, after a mere 4 to 6 weeks after the so-called owner of Guyana would have said, cash transfer don't make any sense, etc. In it, Guyana Chronicles paper has quoted him saying that you then hear them come with these measures that we know they didn't ever conceive, they stole it and they didn't think it through, they didn't even listen out the policies that were given to implement it holistically to benefit people, but they just took pieces and decide to throw it out there. What does this say to our political situation or atmosphere when we are in 2025 and we're seeing all these things happening? How do we analyze that? What are we seeing in terms of our political situation here?
What we have seen in terms of our political situation is two societies that are developing. The society for those who have plenty, and the rest of us who do not have plenty. And the rest of us who do not have plenty, we respond to the situation based on our own reading of the situation. Um, and I think we on our side are doing a good job. We could do a better job at, first of all, acknowledging, look, Guyana has growth. We can't deny the growth. And the growth is not the PPP growth. That growth happens because of God, right? And the question is, how do you translate to development? The PPP goes, it gives 10, as you said, 10th grande, then grande, and grande. It reminds me of wisdom from a man in my village. I see my village woman, Denise Booker, is on. Denise Booker had an uncle named Papa Laito. And Papa Laito had a family. They had a big yard, and it had plenty of little house in the yard. And apparently he go for food, and they tell you they ain't get no food. And he put abuse on them, and he said, all them house you get in this yard, you know, come up to one. When you had them. And that wisdom, I think, if Papa Laito were here, he would get a Nobel Prize, because it really describes when you take all those initiatives that they have announced there, a little tender, it sounds nice, but as you said, after 3-4 months, it's gone. And these things are one-off. It's not that they're systematic. It's a one-off. So it's like somebody give you a freck. If a man give you a freck, or a lady give you a freck, the first thing is a small piece. And you get a small piece, you buy the immediate things that you need. And then you realize, well, it's only a little freck I did get. Tomorrow, gonna get another freck. And the next day, I'm going to get another freck, and so on. So this government is really making the society unstable, economically unstable, because people are living in frustration, people are living in anxiety, people are having to do things that are undignified. You are from a village, I am from a village, and one of the things you know about villagers and poor people, they don't like beg. And poverty force people to do things that mess with their dignity. And over a period of time, people will come to appreciate that we live in a society that doesn't care about them, that doesn't care about their dignity, that doesn't care about their people and personhood, that doesn't care about their health, about education, about their future. They simply don't care. And yes, people will be frustrated, but they will develop a sense of disjoint from government and politics. And that's the worst thing you want in a society, when your people withdraw from the formal system. All right? The PPP is going about, and they're creating a hustler mentality in our country. They go to Africans and they turn Africans into hustlers, but hustlers in the most obscene way. In that they're saying, we're going to give you this. Imagine you take 3,000 young people, use the government to carry them to a PYO conference. Most of those young people think they're going to a government initiative. In their head, you are the government of all the people. But you are using government resources to herd people like chattel to a PYO conference. So you're turning people into hustlers, into chattel, and that is very demeaning and obscene. Then you go to your own community, right? And you're saying to them, you are poor, but don't worry, the fact that you're poor, you're better than other people. So you're telling people, accept your poverty as Indian Guyanese. Accept your poverty because you're getting a little bit more than what we give in to the other people. All right? And so what you're doing is normalizing a kind of surrender in the community to people's poverty and so on. So you're creating this society of hustlers, this society of surrender to that which is bad, that which is worse in the society. And it creates a political volatility in the society that neither Jagdio or Ali, Norton, me, Nigel user, anybody, if it gets out of hand, can cure. This government is putting this country on a powder keg that can blow up at any time. And you know, when that thing go up, it consumes all of us in a negative way. And so therefore, we have to, on the opposition side, recognize what is happening in our society and make sure that when we go to our people, we speak to them as human beings and not a vote. Yes, we want your vote, but we want your vote as a human being, not a statistic. We are out of government. We can't give you money. We can't give you a contract. But what we can do with your support is to create the conditions where this government can't run. They can't hide, or they can run, but they can't hide. That I heard the president, for example, the vice president yesterday saying, well, if Brutus carry us to court, we got thing on he. So you corrupt the man, you corrupt the police force, and then when you get catch because of these programs, because of the opposition, you now get catch with police corruption. You try to take one or two police and throw them under the bus.
Under the bus.
And then when they say, I'm going to fight you back, you say, I got thing on you. But guess what? They got thing on you too. You keep getting that. Right? So you're creating this society of hustlers where corruption becomes, Shaneika, when I was a small boy, I go to my auntie purse. And I see she get a doll in there. I'm going to take out 5 cents. I'm going to take out a penny. What they're doing with this society is you do that because you understand you got to eat tomorrow and you got to go to market, right? You got to get geometry set for go to school. You got to get clothes. You got to get slipper. So you are taking out everything. What I'm saying that you are socialized not to become corrupt, all right? This PPP is saying to our young people, come, we got some money to give you. And they go and you corrupt them. You take away their dignity. You take off their clothes and you put on a red shirt on them. You know, when they brought our enslaved foreparents across the Middle Passage, they had what was called a seasoning period. For 6 months, you break them in. So you take away their name. You take away their language. You take away their religion. They don't no longer name Kofi. They name Jackson, right? You take away, you reduce them from a human to a chattel. And that's what this government is doing. Some black young person in Hope Town who is opposition PNC supporter. But, you know, government call them, they go, they put on a red jersey and parade them. That is akin to a slave market. And that is what those people are destroying, the dignity in the society that our people have. And they know that them 3,000 young people that they carry to a PYO conference, they know that those people are not going to vote for them. Half of those people are not going to vote. But what they're doing is that they're weakening them. They're turning them into cynics. And they hope that that will then have an impact on votes for the opposition, because our own supporters, they're turning off from politics. So when we go to our supporters and say, you know, look, elections are coming around, make sure you register, make sure you go and vote, our people are cynical about it. Whereas the PPP goes into their communities and they do it differently. They do the cynicism differently. They're not alienating their people from politics, but they're doing it in the Amerindian communities and in the African Chinese communities. They're alienating our people from politics, which then makes our job much more difficult.
I agree with you on that. I see a comment here that I believe that I want to because the truth is the comment, some of these comments that you see in your comment section are the sentiments and the things that they're peddling, particularly Vice President Jagyo, as you talked about what they do when they go in to a particular community. Mind you, when they go into certain communities that are said to be aligned with them, they don't go with food stuff. They don't go with a bottle of oil. They don't go with a piece of tool or anything like that. You hear long before an announcement for cash grant for the entire country. We know about cash grants in Region 5. We know about cash grants in Region 6. We know about cash grants in certain parts of Region 9 where they're giving not 100,000, $250,000. Then you pull another section and you have $1 million, etc. And you're doing these things, and then you come to an announcement, which I call it personally an announcement for places like Region 4 and
Mhm.
Region 10 and New Amsterdam and Bartica. Those announcements are for people living in those areas because that's the only time cash grants or anything like that comes to those areas. But they go to some of these areas and they peddle what I'm seeing here in the comments. What did this person is saying the PNC and not the coalition did for Black people specifically here? And they're saying that we're basically trying to divide persons racially. But I want us to bear in mind every time you hear this statement, in 23 years, 1992 to 2015, we had a PPPC government. And for those 23 years, not a single public servant or private sector person received an increase in double figures for 23 years. And that obviously impacted your earning. It impacted anything that you were going to do. It was a coalition government with merely four, in fact, three and a half budget, I will call it, who delivered not to just one section of the public sector, but to the entire public sector, increases at the rate of in double figures, holistically 77% in all. That is what was delivered, which in chain, it took care of families, it dealt with businesses who would have received from the extra spending. When they talked about giving one off, like they do, Christmas time to the joint services, they give this one off money that they took. I want citizens to remember the coalition never took those monies. When we talk about improving education, in those years, education was improved dramatically because more the attendance in school increased because you had a policy that dealt with transportation, that dealt with food, that dealt with the things that were barring from region 1 to 10 students from going there. You talk about the health sector. You talk about water ambulances being seen for the first time in more than 2 decades in interland communities. You're talking about a healthcare system that was improved on the coalition. And we can go on and list. I want when we have these discussions as well that we give these reminders because you know what? This was just a reminder of what you were just talking about. These are the things that they go to
Yeah.
say in communities, the lies that they continue to peddle to tell you you weren't doing better. We saw a crime reduction like no other under the coalition. We weren't seeing kidnappings every month. We just recently saw we had 2 kidnappings in 1 month. And there's some people that are missing. We don't even know what has happened to them. I want to remind Guyanese that we lived in peace under a coalition government who did not discriminate in any form and fashion. And in fact, when the PPP comes to tell our people this, what they are actually saying in change is that we don't discriminate. They are not us. We will discriminate and give you what we want to give to you. That is what you're admitting. And no logical society should sit down and accept a government telling you, well, I am biased, enjoy my bias. If I feel to give you today, I give you, and think that it is okay. It is with this reasoning that we ought to make a conscious decision as the atmosphere changes and we're heading into 2025, to do the right thing. To do the right thing and to see the PPP government for who they are. They are thieves. They are liars. They are racist in all of their actions and bias to not just African Guyanese communities, but to indigenous communities and to poor communities, even in their strongholds, because they're complaining just as bitterly as everybody else. So they will not get away with it. I just wanted to
Yes,
say
no,
that.
you're on point.
Comment had me for a moment.
You're on point. You're on point. Look. The coalition government, like all governments, fell short. But the coalition government has the best human rights record of any government in post-colonial and pre-colonial Guyana. Right? That I challenge anybody to dispute that. They are the most superior human rights record. All right? They did not have oil money, and they sought with whatever they had to spread it around. And if you don't have much and you spread around and so on, you're always going to get complained. But when the teachers complained, when the teachers went on strike, the government, the coalition government called the teachers in and worked out a deal with the teachers. They didn't take away the teachers, threaten to take away the teachers' salary because they strike. They didn't stop the union, the checkout of union dues. They brought them to the table and they give them something that they were happy with. That is the difference. Could they have given the teachers more? Yes, they could have done more, but they gave them enough that they were happy with at that time. Contrast that with this government attitude to teachers. All right? So we can go on and on. But to the caller who's saying that, well, they did nothing for Black people. The coalition government embarked on two initiatives, that were directed at African Guyanese. Only two. They embarked on initiatives that benefited the Indian community. They subsidized. The first thing they did when they get into government was to pump billions of dollars into Gaisuku, right? That went directly to Indian Guyanese, right? So they subsidized, they had initiatives to Indian Guyanese. They had initiatives to Amerindian Guyanese. In fact, some Black people discuss Granger to this day and say he favored the Amerindian people over other people. So they were targeted things to Indians, targeted to Amerindians, and I'm telling you about two that were targeted to Africans. There was what was called a RAID project.
RAID program,
yes, the RAID program in Ithaca, Buxton, Beefy Triumph, and Mocha. That was meant to kickstart and give an infusion of energy into the agriculture in the villages. All right? And that program was just picking up when the PPP took office. They abandoned it. We don't know where the equipment, and they just abandoned it.
They literally went in and stole the equipment, particularly, I can tell you of Ithaca, because I visited and did a little documentary with them. In the dead of the night, they sent persons into the community and stole the equipment out of the community.
Thank you. And the other thing was the Itpadaji initiative,
Mm-hmm.
right? I Mr. Granger came in 2016 to address Coffee 250, and he bemoaned the fact that the United Nations had launched the International Decade of the People of African Descent, and we weren't doing anything. And the United Nations initiative called on governments to take the initiative to break down racism that still exists, they say, in places where Black people live, anti-Black racism. This is the United Nations. And Mr. Granger said, my government has signed on, our government has signed on to it. And I am going to give you a subvention. I think it's $100 million per year, a little drop, right? And I'm going to give you this subvention that you can use it through the decade to inspire programs in the Black community to bring about a qualitative change among African Guyanese so that we can have a more equitable society. And so those two initiatives, we know what they've done with the Itpadaji subvention. They tried everything to break up Itpadaji. So when you come here and say the government didn't do anything for Black people, those two initiatives were directed against Black people, and your government tear it down. The initiatives that were directed at Indian people, such as the money that give to Gaisuku, this government comes in, and on top of the severance that sugar workers got, they give them $250,000. No, I am not going to sit here and say that Indians don't deserve $250,000, that sugar workers do not deserve compensation for the estates that were closed. They do, they deserve it. But the government cannot be doing it in a selective way and in a discriminatory way and then say that it is progress. Look, sisters and brothers, what this government is doing, all it's doing is buying some slaves more expensive than other slaves. It goes in to the sugar belt and it buy a slave for $250,000. And it goes in to Agricola and Sophia and the villages and buy it for $40,000 and a fried rice. Now, that speaks to a worldview of the worth of the different human beings in our society. But at the end of the day, they are not doing anything to transform in a qualitative way the lives of Indian people who are at the bottom of the ladder. All right? The Indian people who are at the social bottom. There is no program but to bribe them, to keep them in line. All right? So you're bribing Indians to keep them in line. You're bribing Africans and Amerindians to whip them into your line. At the end of the day, it is the objective is domination of the society and for the people elite to control the politics and economics of the society forever.
Correct. Couldn't say it better. We are basically out of time, but I want us just for the you'll take a minute or so. Um, 2025 is on the horizon. There are lots of talks about what timing the elections will look like. Persons are still looking to see whether there will be a coalition with the AFC, the PNC, WPA, however you go. What are, in your view, one, where do you see the opposition parties in that regard, whether in a coalition or so, the benefits thereof, or what do you see coming out of 2025? And what would you want to say to our viewers as we just outline all these things that are taking place in the atmosphere pre 2025, knowing that they will be a ramping up in 2025? What should they expect, or what should they be doing in this period?
I hate to say it because, I am a power sharing person, meaning that I believe that ultimately the PPP, the PNC, and all the other political parties need to have a national form of governance. And that is the only way that we are going to be able to heal our society. But more than that, to keep the vultures, the foreign vultures, at the door and not them come in. But sometimes in order to get where you're going, you got to start somewhere. And I think we need to start with a coalition. Because if we do an opposition coalition and we get into government, again, we, this time, with knowledge, we are going to be able to demonstrate to the society what a national government could look like. The coalition would not be a national government because the PPP voters will not be represented there, but it would be a coalition of parties. And if we can show the society that when people with different ideologies, different outlook, different emphasis come together in the interest of the nation, this is what we can do. And so therefore, I do support a coalition. I think the three parties in what I call the authentic opposition, that is the AFC, the PNC, and the WPA, should be sitting down now and beginning to do preliminary talks towards a coalition. You don't have to agree on the mechanics of it. But I, as you know, Shaneika, I'm out there every day interacting on these programs with people. And I am telling you, if tomorrow those three parties were to announce a formal or a preliminary coalition, it will lift the morale of our supporters tenfold. Tenfold. So I think as a combined opposition, we are missing the beat. Perhaps we are waiting until 3 months before the election to put a coalition together. I think we need to put a preliminary coalition together and begin to campaign separately, but campaigning separately as a coalition, right? So that the PNC, and I can't tell the PNC not to say it can win an election. I think the PNC can win an election on its own. But the chances of the PNC winning on its own and a coalition that includes the PNC winning on its own, the latter, the chances of the latter is greater. And so we have to find a way to walk on both legs. The PNC has to be strong because that is the biggest party, right? It has to show strength. It has to show force. But it also has to be nimble enough to say the chances of getting back into power with a reasonable margin, not a 4,000 vote margin. The chances are greater. So I think it will lift the morale of our people if they get that signal from our leaders. So that's it. I think that if, and I hope, and I'm confident that if we mount a strong enough campaign, we could get something closer to a clean voters list. We could get biometric. But those are things you have to demand. If you don't demand it, you don't get it. Because those things are not going to be determined by the PPP. It is going to be done by pressure from internal in the society through the opposition political parties, civil society, and pressure from external forces, right? That is how the PPP showed with the cash transfer thing that they're susceptible to pressure. It's we pressure that make them go towards the cash transfer thing. They did it clumsy and good. We're glad you do it clumsy because that demonstrates that you don't know what you're doing and that the driver of your maxi taxi can't drive, right? And so you all need to turn the keys over to us. I am optimistic, sister. I am very optimistic that as we get closer and closer to the election time, we would be able to mobilize enough people to recognize that we are an alternative to the PPP. They have not put out the census results yet. I smell something, right? I smell something because that stable block, whether it was a majority or a plurality, that stable block of voters that they depended on as a shield, that stable block may have decreased considerably. And I
Correct.
think that they are not releasing it while they're looking to make up the difference. They're looking to make up the difference by nefarious means. So we are saying we demand a publishing of the census report. We demand a cleaning of the voters list. We demand biometrics.
Biometric. All right, thank you, Dr. Hines. And at this point, since we're on that, I want to remind citizens and our viewers, those of you who have time and who are not afraid to go out, we are in front of GCOM every single Tuesday at 1 o'clock on Main Street. So if you have the time, you know somebody that have the time, encourage them to join that picket every Tuesday at 1 o'clock so that we can bear some more pressure on this government to get it right as we head into the next general and regional elections. Dr. Hines, I want to thank you so much for joining today's program. Of course, it's always a privilege to have you here. And, our discussion always bears some good fruit. And I hope to see you soon again.
Thank you
From
very
my
much. Thank you very much, Shaneika. And I do owe you a visit on Politics 101, which will be coming soon. Thanks again, and
Okay.
please keep up the good work. It's good to see young people like yourself, especially young women, taking leadership role in this struggle. It augurs well for the future of our country.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. All right, viewers, thank you so much for being with us today. As I said, keep posted to our social media platforms. As things happen, sometimes we'll come up with other programs during the week. Keep posted as we continue to keep the conversation running on the current issues, as we continue to, highlight and talk about the issues so that we can see things being done. And of course, when it comes to the next general and regional election, that we come together and put out the PPP so that our society can benefit holistically from our resources and to see Guyana go to another level. Thank you, viewers, and do have a wonderful weekend.